Welcome to another episode of the Boxing Lockdown, powered by SA Boxing Talk. I'm with four gentlemen, five including myself. We have a special guest here tonight, Alan Toweels Jr. and Devin, Hayden, Cyril. Welcome, including our special guest, Alan Toweels Jr. And if you are a South African boxing fan and you've never heard of the Toweels, then you don't know shit about South African boxing. Thought you'd like that one, Devin. So, Al, welcome to the show. It's basically all of us. We just come out and we talk boxing and we kind of shoot the breeze on various topics. So welcome, and it's an absolute honor, privilege, and pleasure to be hosting you on the Boxing Lockdown.
Thank you, Colin. It's a pleasure being here. It's a pleasure being with experts.
You're experts in our own head. So actually, we brought you on. We're going to be talking a few things, but obviously, when Hayden suggested to bring you on, I thought it was a great idea, and I wanted to talk about Pierre Coetzee, not particularly about Pierre Coetzee, because obviously he's alive and well, and he's looking great, and he's really doing well in his life outside of boxing and after his career. But we wanted to talk to you about particularly your dad's role, you, and the stuff that went on behind the scenes. And what sparked this idea was I was going through a few weeks ago, Riddick Bowe, Pierre Coetzee. At that time, Pierre Coetzee, I believe, was the number one contender, and Bowe was number two. And this was kind of billed as an eliminator. And what happened was, so I started watching it. It could have been on TVKO, which was obviously the sister branch to HBO then. And I was watching the press conference, and I saw Rock Newman rather unfortunately start talking about the political situation in South Africa, which in that stage in 92, South Africa was on the cusp of becoming the new South Africa and reform. And unfortunately, Riddick Bowe's manager, Rock Newman, started talking about all this apartheid, which had nothing to do about boxing. And I saw your late father getting up, getting very emotional, and I saw you pulling him away, which led me to calling you the very next day saying, "Al, what happened?" So I'm going to start that question with this show, and I'm going to say to you, what was it like being at that moment when Rock Newman, who really was out of order, a pain in the ass, and should have never brought up the political situation at that point in boxing?
Well, we were going to a press conference for a world heavyweight title eliminator, which was massive, you know. And we were sitting there. My dad was sitting next to me, and the next minute, Rock Newman starts speaking, but he came across very aggressively about the situation in South Africa, you know, and it was like a curveball thrown at us, you know. So my father, he started discussing the political situation, and like you said at that time, the wheels of transformation was moving forward. Madiba was released in 1990. This happened in 1992, and he started getting a bit aggressive in his approach. It was like he was attacking the camp. And that's when my father stood up, and my father thought it was grossly unfair. And he thought this was not the forum to discuss. It was not a political forum. It should have been a discussion between Pierre fighting Bowe and Bowe fighting Pierre in the title and the elimination fight as it is. So my father, yeah.
No, go ahead.
So at that stage, my father stood up and said, "You don't do that. It's not fair. It's not right." And then Riddick Bowe said, "You don't tell me," not Riddick Bowe, Rock Newman said, "You don't tell me what to say and how to say it." And then it got out of hand. I went up to my late dad, Shane. I pulled him away and I said to him, "Dad, just relax. Let's just focus on the boxing."
He almost made a comment like, "You're not going to tell me what to do because this isn't South Africa now." He made some sort of jibe like that. So you've obviously watched Pierre and Bowe. What was your impression of that fight? Because going into that fight, you know, Pierre was a legitimate world-class heavyweight contender then. But my memory of that fight was, even though Pierre lost that fight, he proved to the world that, man, he's world-class and he can fight. What were your thoughts of that fight?
Yeah, going into the fight, you know, I thought Pierre was a legitimate contender. I was quite young at the time, so obviously I was like 9 years old in '93. But thinking about it now, I watched the fight again a few days ago, and he was a legitimate contender. I think it came in at a time when heavyweights were hardly contested for the heavyweight division, and And yeah, I think he might have probably even done a bit better in today's generation, considering the difference in talent that they had back then. So yeah.
Hayden, back in the 90s, when kind of Lennox Lewis was the ruler of the division, there was a strong saying that there was boxing and then there was heavyweights. Now, with that in mind, cast your mind back to the 90s, and from what you remember, what research that you've done, how would you compare the heavyweight scene now to how it was in the 90s? Bearing in mind, we had Drux Malone talking about the second golden era in heavyweight boxing was in the 90s.
Yeah.
And the first era was the 70s, sorry.
Basically, the sort of bigger guys, the heavyweights, are pursuing things like American football, rugby, those sort of sports, because they're the popular, they're in the now. And that's basically the reason. And what I wanted to say, when you guys were talking about 92, those fights, that's the year I was born. So that's crazy.
You know what, Hayden? Don't make your problems ours, bro. Seriously, with all due respect. Dev, let me ask you. So having said that, and maybe that'll be the next question to Alan as well, is that there seems to be genuine interest again in the heavyweight division, because when Lewis left, the Klitschko's, whether they were good or not, were incredibly boring. And guys were just interested in the division. All of a sudden now, people are legitimately interested. Is that because Tyson Fury is a character? Anthony Joshua is vulnerable? Dylan White can really punch? What do you think it is?
I think it's got something to do with the little thing called social media and how much more accessible not just fighters in general, but sports stars are to the common man. I mean, any of your favorite fighters are pretty much a tweet away. Whether they choose to reply to it or not is on them. But that makes it more interesting because you think that there's something more than just a fan sportsman relationship. You think that you could possibly be a friend of sorts. So people are more forthcoming because there's more of their content available about their lives. Tyson, I mean, his whole career was built on VHS tapes, and most of the guys today are building their careers on Instagram. And that's in your pocket, that's in your hand, that's what you're walking around with. So I think it's going to make for a bigger scene, but whether or not the hype is the same as the 90s, I don't know. I think the 90s hype, to me, when I remember, because I'm a lot older than Hayden, I'm an 83 kid, and I seem to remember the hype around Mike Tyson monumental and something more than anything boxing has actually seen. If you're going to compare the 2 decades to each other.
And if you're in the 80s, it was first Betamax and then VHS. And then let me switch back to you, and let's go back to Pierre. His first two losses, Bernard Benton and then Ozzy Ocasio. Both you lost on points. The Ozzy Ocasio fight was in 88 in Cape Town at the Good Hope Centre, and I happened to be at that fight. He obviously redeemed himself and won both fights, knocking out Benton in one round with your dad, and then obviously beating Ocasio again in a very close fight, but he won the rematch, no problem, on points against Ocasio. At that point, did you ever think that Pierre could go on and become a legitimate world-class heavyweight, bearing in mind that he lost to 2 guys initially that he should have beaten possibly in the first fights?
Well, if you look at the 2 guys that he lost to, okay, I know they were cruiserweights. Bernard Benton was a former cruiserweight champion.
Correct.
But the way he came back with Bent was he won a clear knockout in the first round. It was a tremendous left hook that he caught him with. Ocasio was also a former world champion, and lost to Ocasio, came back. Ocasio was a spoiler, and he gave Larry Holmes trouble in his fight with Holmes when they fought at one stage. So at that stage, we never thought he'd go straight right up to the heavyweight title eliminator. You're still in the grooming stages, you know. And my late dad said, let's just take one step at a time, see how he goes, build him up slowly, bring him spoilers, bring him sluggers, let him get that experience. So at that particular stage, he was still in the embryonic stages of his career.
Okay, I want to ask you a question, and I'm hoping that you'll be brutally honest.
Yes.
Often trainers or managers, or I guess you were helping your dad at that stage, get into a fight and the chips or the odds are stacked against them. Now, against Bo, you were massive. You were a massive underdog. You weren't supposed to win that fight. You really weren't.
Yeah.
But it proved, like I said earlier, that Pierre could fight, could mix it up, and was legitimately world class. Was it that fight you thought to yourself, wow, Pierre's actually potentially a lot better than I've actually given him credit for?
I'll tell you which fight really turned our full-on belief in Pierre. Although we always believed in Pierre, it was when he fought Jose Revolta.
Yes, great fight.
That was a hell of a slugfest.
And the referee was terrible in that fight, by the way.
And Revolta went 10 rounds with Tyson, although Tyson stopped him. And he put up a hell of a performance. Pierre got dropped. He came back and he ended up stopping him in the 10th round. You know? So that was a turning point in saying, wow, I think Pierre can handle the big boys, you know? But going into the Bo fight, I can still recall clearly when Rodney Berman offered the fight to my father, he didn't want the Bo fight. He would rather have Pierre fought Michael Moore. You with me? Because Michael Moore was a WBO heavyweight champion. We were very worried about Riddick Bowe. And Pierre, you know, he fought well. He put his heart and soul into that fight, you know. I mean, Bo was an exceptional talent. Let's face it. If he never went off the rails, he would have probably performed much longer. His career, there would be much more longevity in his career.
Okay, let's just stay with that fight before we maybe talk about the other two, which were against Foreman and against Bruno. There were several low blows, if I recall, in that fight, and some of them were blatant. Yes. Do you think, in your opinion, looking back now, and if you look at the fight now, that Bo should have been disqualified?
You're talking about Bo and Pierre? Bo was laying in the low blows.
No, well, initially Bo was. Do you think he should have been disqualified?
I must be honest with you. If you look at when the referee stopped the fight, Bo hit him low again. Then it threw an uppercut. Pierre turned his in, and the referee stopped the fight.
Yeah.
The referee should at least taken a point off him, or you know, because he repeatedly did hit Pierre low, and Pierre, being the man that he is, humble, he wasn't that type of to challenge the referee. He accepted whatever the decisions the referee made, you know. And I can still recall after that fight, when the referee stopped the fight, we looked at Bo's corner. Bo was huffing, breathing quite heavily. I think Bo, in a way, underestimated Pierre, you know. And yeah, I thought maybe if the referee never stopped the fight, maybe Pierre could have come back, you know, based on his conditioning, purely on his conditioning.
And if my memory, and this is just going by memory because I haven't watched the fight that closely, Bo made an ass of himself because his trunk split. Am I right? Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That his trunk split. But there's one thing I must say that always stays in my mind after the fight in the dressing room. When we were sitting in the dressing room, Pierre was sitting, my father and myself, and Pierre was a bit forlorn, down, you know, he lost the fight. Bo comes into the dressing room, Bo sits on the table, and then he sits there for about a minute and he just shakes his head and he says to Pierre, wow, I just cannot believe what courage you've got. He was so taken in by Pierre's gutsiness, you know, and that it was wonderful for Bo to come into the dressing room and acknowledge Pierre's performance, you know, which was a great thing for us in the camp also, you know.
So let me ask you, how will you remember Riddick Bowe?
I remember Riddick Bowe. The fights that stand out the most with Riddick Bowe is his fights against Holyfield, and him refusing to fight Lennox Lewis. That's what I remember most about him. And I remember he was an awesome talent. He had it all. He had it all in talent-wise, but he just never stayed at the top as long as he could have. And I wish he had fought against Lennox Lewis. I wish he had fought against Mike Tyson, you know, but unfortunately that didn't happen.
Hayden, let me ask you, obviously, you know, Bo got a silver medal getting stopped in 2 rounds in the Olympic final in 88 against Lennox Lewis. Can we assume that Bo ducked Lewis because he knew what could have happened if they fought in the pros?
I don't know, hey, because amateurs are very different from pros. I understand that sort of logic coming across, but I don't think when you get that far into your professional career that it matters too much, especially with what they had both achieved going, you know, sort of into those fights. So maybe mentally there was a little bit of, I don't want to fight him, and there was another bit of, why do I have to fight this?
Devin, we discussed it a few weeks ago that my flop in boxing was Bo. But how would you sum up Riddick Bowe's career? Bearing in mind that he was unbeaten in his career when he retired.
I liken his career somewhat to a bit of a loose cannon rolling around on the deck, because as much success that he was able to achieve inside the ring, he also attracted a lot of controversy inside the ring as well. Outside the ring, in his later life after his retirement, he did make an appearance. He popped up in South Africa and in Cape Town, and an absolute shell of the person that he used to be. I remember standing nearby him, and it was difficult to understand what he was saying a lot of the time, whether or not that's from punishment that he's taken inside the ring or if he had a few to drink, I'm not sure. But I've heard from other people that it seems to be a problem that's crept up on him. And my lasting memory is always going to be that Galata fight because of what it turned out to be. But if I can, I'd just like to know from Al, when you're rating South Africa's best heavyweights, and if you would rate Gerrie Coetzee as the number one, who do you put below him? And where would Francois Botha, in his prime, feature against any of the crop of South African heavyweights of that time? And I'm going to be referring to Gerrie Coetzee, Piers, Fourie, and Coetzee, Johnny Deploy, Corrie Sanders, Kali Knutse, and let's say Mike Schutte.
Okay. Now, before you answer that question, I just want to say that there is debates on who is the greatest heavyweight in South African boxing history, and I'll tell you why. When Coetzee won the world title against Stokes, the linear champion was Larry Holmes. When Corey Sanders knocked out Klitschko, the linear champion was Lennox Lewis. Both careers were very, very, very similar. So depending on what you liked, they were very, very similar. To me, they were very close on being the same. Alan, having said that, your opinion?
Okay. I would rate Gerrie Coetzee first, as SA's top heavyweight. If you look at the opponents that he fought, the Mike Weavers, and Mike Weaver gave Larry Holmes one hell of a fight. He went 12 rounds, got stopped in the 12th round. He fought Pinklin Thomas, who then went on to fight Tyson a couple of years back. He fought Michael Dokes. At one stage, a tremendous hand speed, if you can remember. Michael Dokes was quite a good, exceptional fighter. So I would put Gerrie Coetzee right on top, number one. Number two, because Corey, it was an outstanding knockout win over Klitschko. No one expected that victory. I would put him there in number two. He also fought some good caliber fighters. So I would put him there in number two. Number three, I would put Pierre above Francois Botha. That's just my personal.
I agree.
I know Francois fought Tyson, and I know he put up a good performance against Tyson, who was on his way. He wasn't the Tyson of the young in his prime. Pierre fought Bo when he was in his prime. Pierre, he fought a very good top fighter there. Francois Botha, okay, got stopped by Lennox Lewis, but I would put Pierre above Francois Botha. So it will be Gerrie, Corey, Pierre, Francois Botha, and then Johnny Deploy, and then the rest.
Guys, I actually don't think we're going to have time to discuss Bo and Bruno's fights with Pierre, but let's move along. I like the flow what Devin was suggesting. Let's talk about Pierre now against the modern, the champions or the fighters that are currently going. How would Pierre have done against Anthony Joshua?
When I look at who Pierre fought, I believe that crop of fighters in the 90s, besides the 70 heavyweights, I think they were the top great crop of fighters. You had Bo, you had Holyfield, you had Mercer, you had there was Morrison, who was a devastating puncher, Michael Moore. Pierre against Joshua, I think Pierre would have a good chance against Anthony Joshua, especially he's a pressure fighter. He hit reasonably hard. Anthony Joshua hasn't got a great chin, as we know. He's a nice technical boxer, but I would give Pierre a very good chance in that fight. Similarly with Wilder. I know at one stage people rated Wilder as the hardest hit heavyweight of all time based on his knockout percentage ratio. But in my personal opinion, Wilder is He's not technical, you know. He's got a good right hand. Doesn't look good in that ring. And Bo, pound for pound, is a much better fighter, complete fighter than Wilder is. I think Pierre would give him a good fight. It would be a good fight for Pierre. You know, I don't think they would destroy Pierre the way Bo did and Bruno and Foreman. You know, different breed of fighter.
Well, I must disagree with you. I don't think Bo destroyed Pierre. I think he kind of warmed down. I think Foreman obviously did a harder job, but, you know, there was also maybe accumulation of all the hard fights. Cyril, let me ask you, Pierre Coetzee against Anthony Joshua, your opinion. And you don't have to agree with Toweels Jr.
I think the thing with Joshua is that we've seen him get caught, and as Alan says, his chin is questionable. We've seen that time and time again. So I would give Pierre a really good chance. I think it's a fight that could go either way. You know what I mean? It's a fight based on the fact that, you know, you see whenever you see Joshua under pressure, when he gets caught, we've seen him get buckled and go down at times. I would give Pierre Coetzee a really good chance.
Hayden, I mean, I need your opinion on this. I mean, how do you think that fight goes, bearing in mind that Pierre was hell of a tough. I mean, he got put over, but man, it was, I mean, he got up and he fought his ass off.
Yeah, it's one of those stylistic ones, isn't it? Where Pierre obviously has the pressure fighting, and Anthony Joshua met a guy like Andy Ruiz Jr., who's not a pressure fighter, but he's a puncher. He punches in bunches, and when he does turn it on, it really affected Joshua. So now if I'm comparing him to sort of a smaller version, a bigger version of Andy Ruiz, I think that gives him a lot of trouble. Anthony Joshua, it's hard to compare.
Dev, your opinion on that fight? I mean, it's like a super fantasy fight, but who would you go with?
I've got to be a traditionalist in terms of the super heavyweight division and not just the heavyweight division, because Frank Bruno was a massive hulking heavyweight. Anthony Joshua is a massive hulking heavyweight. I got to think that somewhere along the line, although a fun fight, the size does end up grinding the smaller fighter down, as it typically does. I mean, we're talking about Alexander Usyk against the bigger heavyweights today. What's it going to kind of look like? The same kind of thing can be said for this kind of fantasy match. I think a fun fight. I think hard as nails, pure performance, and I think he's good enough to stick around for 12 rounds, but I think loses a decision.
Yeah, and I think he's gutsy enough. Alan, how does Pierre do against Tyson Fury? I mean, right now for me, as awkward and as difficult it is sometimes to watch him stylistically, I don't think anyone beats Fury right now. And I think my opinion would be Pierre would have had a very hard fight against Fury.
You see, I agree because Fury, to me, Fury is the best heavyweight today. That's my personal opinion. He's awkward. He's got a good jab. He's got a good reach. He's a big man. And he can box. And a good boxer, a good stylish boxer would give Pierre problems, you know. So, but Pierre would be in there, you know. I don't think he would knock Pierre out, but I think he would have a unanimous points decision against Pierre. Pierre was extremely tough, you know. And I think Fury stylistically is ahead of him there.
I'm gonna put you on the spot, and I hope this isn't too much of a curveball, but a fight nearly happened between Corey Sanders and Pierre Coetzee. Nearly happened, but then Pierre retired. Who would have won that fight?
Okay, what happened with that fight? They contacted my father and they offered him Corey Sanders, and they offered a good sum of money for Pierre to fight Corey Sanders. It was a hell of a good sum of money for those days, and my father said no. Pierre is done. So Pierre had enough of boxing. Even before the Bruno fight, his last fight, he had enough, and he wanted to get out. So at that particular stage, I think if he had a fight Corey, I think Corey would have taken him. He was ready for the taking. That's just my personal opinion. That's my personal opinion at that stage. But if it had gone back 2-3 years earlier, it would have been a different story.
I tell you what, we can't knock you for honesty. I mean, that's That's like, I take my respect to you, Al. Cyril, yeah, so I mean, let's go one further. Like Osborne in his prime against Pierre in his prime, you got to go with Pierre Coetzee, correct or not?
Yeah, I think with Osborne is that when was his prime? Because most of his career has been out of. He hasn't. You know what I mean? I think we haven't really. I don't think we ever really got to see the best of Osborne ever. You know, so he's always a bit lazy, a bit overweight. So yeah, I don't see how he beats someone who would be as focused as Pierre Coetzee.
Jeff, before I get to you, Hayden, Francois Buddha, Pierre Coetzee, who's your pick and why?
Coetzee. I'm not just saying that because I think that I've got to be nice to everybody on the show, but I'd like to think that it's going to be a battle of the better chin. And I think, Buerta wasn't a big heavyweight. He wasn't a guy, he was tough. He punched hard enough. But I think that stylistically, Pierre Coetzee, it would be a hell of a war, has got enough to beat a guy like Francois Buddha over 12 rounds. Although I'm pretty sure that if this gets out on the internet, I'm going to take all heaps of shit for saying that. Sorry.
Oh, well, it's okay. Some people think you don't know shit about boxing. That's okay. We still love you, though. Hayden, in summing up now, I mean, what would you think? Because back in the 90s, we had some really decent and good and very good heavyweights coming through the ranks. The problem that we have now is that there's no good heavyweights coming through. We've got a couple of young kids obviously looking to make their debut and so forth. But right now, as it stands, particularly in the last 5 to 10 years, there have been no standout South African heavyweights. Why is that?
Well, actually, I find it quite funny because we obviously got a guy that Alan trains in the heavyweight division who's like a wrecking machine, Wilhelm, Dragon Nieva, who kind of
smash.
He's moving up the ranks. Obviously, Alan's got to take it really slowly with him because obviously building up his fundamentals with such a short amateur career. But have you seen a guy that can hit that hard in such a long time? I haven't. Most certainly not in South Africa. Why hasn't? I mean, how many heavyweights are there in South Africa at the moment in the actual ratings? I'm not even sure.
Well, my question was, why isn't there enough interest in that? I mean, considering that we had so many, what do you think it is? Do you think it's because boxing is just too much of a hard sport? Do you think?
I know what it is. It comes down to a simple thing. It comes down to money. How do you make money as a professional sportsman being a big guy? It's not boxing, I can tell you right there. And it is boxing in the long term because you can make a lot of money in the long term. But I think so many people are so desperate to make money so quickly, especially, surrounding the financials of the country, that boxing is just not the option that you want to employ.
Alan, would you agree with what Hayden said? Because I think he's got a lot of valid points there.
Absolutely. And over and above that, if we market our guys well, and that's the responsibility not only of the promoter, but the trainer and the manager. And if you've got a heavyweight, you need to market them well, you need to sell them. I think if we do that correctly, like they did in the past decades, we will get a well-known, popular heavyweight out there, a big draw card. That's what we need, a big draw card out there.
Alan, I'm going to ask you this question because I know you sit on the fence. I know you sit on the fence with this one. I come under a lot of criticism often when people say the fighters of yesteryear and yesterday were way better technically, physically, mentally than they are today. And I disagree. I think medicine's changed. I think supplementation's changed. I think genetics have changed. I think just a lot's changed. But I want to get your perspective, and I'm going to ask you this. Are fighters from yesterday better than the fighters that are here today? And why?
You're asking me?
I'm asking Alan Toweels Jr., who sits. I know you sit on the fence because I know you sit on the fence because you were brought up in the old school way of thinking, but now you're in a society where it's new school way of thinking, and you actually don't have a choice. So that's why I'm putting you on the spot. I'm asking you your opinion.
100%, no problem. Although I'm in the present stage of boxing, I still believe the old fighters had something different. They had something special. They were hardened men. They fought 15 rounds. In boxing, the 13th to the 15th round was the decider of many world title fights. They lived harder. Their lifestyles were much more difficult, you know. I look at a guy like Sugar Ray Robinson. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah.
I look at a guy like Sugar Ray Robinson, who had one loss in 123 fights at one stage of his career, going up to almost 220 fights, 19 losses, and those losses were towards the tail end of his career. Wow. Guy that fought almost every month. How did they do that? How did they manage to absorb such punishment? I look at the work rate of the older fighters and the punches that they threw, the combinations that they threw, body, head, body, doubling up on punches. I don't see much of that today. I look at the styles of the boxers. They also talk about Mayweather's defense, roll the shoulder roll. And then I look at the past fighters like Ezra Charles and Archie Moore, where they rolled their shoulders. And when they rolled their shoulders, guys were thrown at them nonstop, and they counted those guys, and they threw back nonstop. So I just can't see those guys. To me, the old-time fighter had something special in terms of stamina, combinations, stylistically, the amount of punishment that they absorbed. It's unbelievable.
Hayden, I was just going to say this is a great suggestion bringing Alan Toweels Jr. on. Hayden, with me speaking to you, do you agree with Alan? I mean, hold on. No, I'm not going to ask you if you agree with him. I'm going to ask you what's your opinion of the olden day guys compared to the modern day guys. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it comes down to a mindset, obviously training tactics as well, and back in the day, as we said before, it was a thing of you don't really care what's going to happen after your career, or you living in the moment. You live and you die in that ring. Whereas now it's like, oh, let's think about our futures, our families, and that's just like a modernistic way of thinking. You know, like the world doesn't revolve around boxing anymore. The boxers are thinking about things outside of the ring just as much as they're thinking about being in the ring. And I think that's where you got to change, is where the guy's not willing to die in the ring nowadays. He still to think, oh, I have to go home and look after this and this and this and this, and that's primarily why you get a change in style.
Well, also remember something, and it's very important to mention that the safety aspects of boxing have changed 1,000%. I mean, it's crazy how things have changed. Back then they had 3 ropes, like I said. Now they got 4. Medically, ringside physicians are there. Referees are quick to call the fights now. Cyril, do you prefer modern day fighters or olden day fighters?
Well, look, the olden day fighters gave you classics. I think there were more classics. Like if you go back now, have a look at the old fights, there were more entertaining moments. There were more wars in terms of. But does that necessarily mean they were better? I don't know. I think the modern day fighters, they do take time off. There's more time between their fights, which in a way it kind of helps them recover from previous fights and get better. And so it's a difficult question. It's totally this. The eras are so different that it's almost a different sport. So
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's a different sport. But Dev, let me just come in there. Like the era that Alan's talking about, fighters were over the hill at the age of 29, 30. And that's because they were fighting literally every month. Now we're seeing fighters box into their late 30s and still winning world championships and performing at a certain level. And Hopkins becoming the oldest world champion in boxing history at the age of 49. Is that because of the breaks between the fights? Also the duration of not 15 rounds anymore, it's 12 rounds. And also because of, honestly, medicine's changed. There's great supplementation. There's physiotherapists, there's chiropractors. I mean, there's a lot of the sports scientists now. All of those factors must play a role in the modern day fighter.
There is that, and then the sad thing is there's also that X factor of the medicinal cow that Mexico has, and supplements that come from over the border, and Russians leaving vials of medicines in hotel rooms in East London. You know, there's guys taking shortcuts today, and I quite frankly think it's not just boxing, it's not just MMA, I think it's all sports. Guys of today are taking shortcuts because the medicine and the technology is there. They're also trying to get away with it. We're trying to catch them. We're trying to out them. And, you know, it's very difficult to build a comparison with, is a fighter of today better than a fighter of yesteryear? But if you had to put the two of them together and one of them on the source that's been hiding it for so long, what is the outcome? We don't know, because I think it's very widespread. And I think it's something that needs to be talked about. When you say old school, how far back are you willing to go to say the cutoff for old school is?
No, I'm talking about from the maybe to the 1920s to the 1990s, or maybe not even the 1990s, up until the 1970s, because the fighters were fighting more frequently.
So if you're willing to call the end of the classic era around about the 70s, let's say, maybe push it to the 80s, and then Hayden alluded to the amount, or sorry, Cyril alluded to the amount of classics being dished up. I mean, Manny Pacquiao, how many classics has he had just on his own with the Barreras of this world, the Moraleses of this world, and the lighter weight divisions? I think today has just as much quality as the lighter weight divisions of yesteryear in terms of actual trilogies and wars and sagas. But when you're going to look at who were the draw cards of the, like, between the two sort of comparisons of old school fighters and new school fighters, I think new school fighters are going to run away with it just because of the way that media is structured today. But, you know, I would always love to have seen Sugar Ray Robinson
this is going to be the last
day today, as you said a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I agree. I really, really do agree. Al, this is gonna be the last topic of the discussion tonight, and we're obviously gonna change it to one of your prospects. I think it's a real prospect, Akani Puzi, and we've spoken about him twice in the show, and I'm one of the guys, and I'm sure maybe the three other guys will agree with me. It's time to push him. You know, I think he's 11 or 12-0 now, and he's a good prospect. Was in the national team as an amateur, so he's got that foundation. You've brought him along nicely, but what's the next step? Like, do you agree with us when we say he needs to take that step down?
Yes and no. I'll tell you why. When we say he was a good amateur, I look at the South African amateur scene in the last 10 years, and I compare the South African amateur scene to the overseas amateur scene. There's a big difference. So I believe a South African fighter needs to have more fights to even think of a world title fight. So Akani Puzi is 11-0. I think I can build him up with a few more fights. I think a Johnny Miller fight will be a good fight for him. It may even expose him. He's Johnny Miller, although he's towards the end of his career, he can cause a lot of trouble for Pierre. He's a boxer. He's got quick hands. He still can move. Akani. My mistake. He can.
No, I was going to say, is Pierre coming back now?
No, sorry. He can cause a lot of problems. So a guy like Johnny Miller would be, I would say, the next in line. I wouldn't want to think of Nkunu and those guys as yet. You know, it's he's still below the radar with those guys. Not ready for that. You know, and if you look at his first fight, Akani's first fight, he wasn't that impressive. Now slowly he's getting into his rhythm. Through fighting 12 rounds, getting more experience as time goes by. He's looking better. He's throwing better combinations. I think in about 4 to 5 fights, we can talk about maybe an intercontinental title and then move on from there. You know, that's where I stand with Akani.
Helen, you wanted to ask something?
Yeah, how close was, obviously, Akani Puzi called out Yuri Kalenga at the end of his post-fight interview. I mean, how close do you think you'd be able to make that sort of fight?
I first want that Johnny Miller fight and see how he goes with the Johnny Miller fight. I mean, we've already been negotiating, discussing things with Johnny Miller. I mean, it's in the pipeline. It's just a matter of when. And then thereafter, we can make a decision on Kalenga. The thing is with Yuri Kalenga, it'll be very expensive, you know?
I think Patrick Boyambi actually went on, because I know you and him have a nice history of fighting each other between your boxes. He said it would cost about $25,000 to bring out Yuri Kalenga. Is that sort of unattainable in this market?
I think so. At the moment, $25,000, it's a lot of money. You know, I would think so. for now, you know. That's why with this lockdown, it's had a major, it's a bit of a detrimental effect on everything. So let's look what's within our boundaries. And I think Johnny Miller would be the next one. And then thereafter, let's see where we can go from there.
Well, Al, if you're looking for an easy fight, I know Devon's kind of hitting his bag in the garage and he can, maybe make cruisers. Just depends how much you're going to offer him. Cyril, I think, guys, let's have one last question for Al each. Cyril, let me start with you if you've got one question for Alan.
I think you already answered my question regarding Makani and Johnny Miller. Obviously that would be like a really big fight. That's the kind of fight that would draw a lot of interest locally. Obviously, there's no telling when this lockdown is over. But how serious are the talks?
Well, I'll tell you, I've had a chat with his management team, and they said they're keen. They were supposed to fight in Germany against Zesterenko, I think. But I don't think that's going to come off. We don't know yet, So the talks are there. So it's in progress.
Sorry, Al, if I could ask you, I mean, Johnny's going to fight Zesterenko, or was going to fight Zesterenko at heavyweights. We can assume that Johnny will fight, if the fight happens, with Prusi at cruiserweight, correct?
Yes, at cruiserweight.
Okay.
And you know what? At one stage, Johnny was sticking to the heavyweight, but in an interview on SA Boxing Talk, he reiterated that he wants to go down to the cruiserweights. So That's what made us. I think let's get Johnny on board with Kani and see how we do there.
Dev, do you have a last question for Al?
Al, how hard is it to coach Wilhelm Niebuhr to throw a jab? And I say that with the utmost respect because I really love the guy. I love watching him. He's a Hulk smash kind of guy. And I just think to myself, if you can get this guy to jab, he is running a train through everyone in the heavyweight division in South Africa. What do you think? I
agree with you. It's something that we've been working on. He's a 10-year project, That's what I say. It's going to be a long-term project, and we're working on his technique, and he needs to apply it now in the ring, Some guys pick up quickly and they can put it all together. Some guys take longer than others. And he takes a bit of time. He's still got this attacking mode. And I don't want to take it away, that attacking mode, that aggressive mode from him, So we've got to match that with the technique. It will come and we'll impress you.
Hayden, do you have a last question for Al?
I do. And it's got to do with the way the sort of Toweels have been involved in boxing from yesteryear to sort of in today's world. I mean, if you think back to the Toweels back in the day, it was the promoters, the trainers. It's sort of the same thing today. I mean, your sister took up a position as a promoter recently, and obviously you're a trainer of boxers. I mean, how do you think, like your family, do you think they would be proud of the way you sort of setting things up nowadays?
I think so. It's always been in the boxing has always been in the Toweels family, since 1924. And like you said, my uncle was a promoter, my dad was a trainer, my other uncle was a manager, and they were fighters in their days. And we're following the same path, so we're keeping the legacy going. And because I've got a reasonably big stable, I need to stop. We had to take out a promoter's license. My sister had to take out a promoter's license to give them regular fights. Otherwise, we would never get fights, So it's continuing the legacy as it was before, and hopefully we can produce some good fighters.
Gentlemen, I think it's a wrap. I think it's been a great show. Al, thanks for joining us on on the Boxing Lockdown, powered by SA Boxing Talk. Al, your last parting shot for the show.
Thank you for putting me. I'm really honored to be here. Honestly, thank you. I would like to thank Dev for his contribution to SA Boxing Buzz. I know there's a lot of controversy sometimes. I always read your. I read your page. I don't comment, but I laugh sometimes. And there's some very good pointers. And at least you put it out there. You're trying to build the young man, trying to build boxing and trying to promote boxing. I thank Hayden for SA Boxing Talk. It's wonderful. You're promoting the guys. You're getting them exposure. Thank you, Cyril, for your articles. At least you trying to promote our guys, get the guys out there in the public's eye. For people, especially specifically for people that are not boxing people, You know, that's the market we need to reach to get more of the non-boxing people in the game. And thank South Africa's top trainer, Colin Nathan, for inviting me here. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Al, let me just ask you, are you scared to comment on Devin's group because he's scared he might attack you?
Come on.
No. You know what happens when there's a debate and it doesn't stop? Then one guy says one thing, then another guy says another. I just enjoy reading everybody's contribution there, whether I agree with it or not. You know, it does add spice to the whole boxing scene. You know?
Yeah, I have to agree with you. And I mean, love him or hate him, Devin does put it out there. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. It's actually been a great show. I've had a lot of fun doing this. So the boxing fans and viewers have been watching it. This is the Boxing Lockdown, powered by SA Boxing Talk. We will see you again soon.